Also auf YouTube bin ich jetzt.
Oh.
Wenn du mich suchst bei YouTube, martgore 101, übertrage ich jetzt gerade. Das ist ja schon allein da, das ist schon eklig. Okay. Ich weiß noch immer nicht, was ich da machen muss. Okay, doch. Ja, ist schon ein bisschen eklig. Hast du mich?
Ja.
Wie esse ich denn jetzt? Ah, mit dem Arsch, okay.
Ja. Das muss von hinten dran, ja.
Ist gar nicht so einfach. So. Ich muss erstmal den Baum schütteln, glaube ich. Die Steuerung ist gar nicht so einfach. Warum läuft der immer rückwärts jetzt?
Ich weiß es nicht, ich habe dieses Spiel nicht ganz sicher.
Soll das sein? Und die werden immer größer.
John woke to the shrill cry of his alarm clock and lay there, rigid, his usual morning condition. But there was another reason John couldn't get out of bed. It was the weight. A weight that had nothing to do with his muscles or fat or sweaty blankets. John was weighed down by a piece of paper. The invitation to his high school reunion. From across the years, the words he'd heard in the schoolyard were still clear. You're a loser. No one will ever love you.
Ja, und? Das wäre doch egal. Ja, noch ein Penis.
John had 3 months until the reunion to turn his life around. First, he needed to clean up. John called it his study, but it was basically for games and porn. Mostly porn.
Aua. Wie machst du jetzt das?
The only reason he'd ordered so much takeout was because Delilah, the delivery peen, made John feel butterflies in his testicles.
Ja, du hast unten so eine Aufgabenliste.
Ja, aber die einen habe ich gemacht. Ich kann doch ja gar nichts mehr machen jetzt.
Ja, die Teller, die da oben sind, die solltest du irgendwie sauber machen.
Ja, aber wie? Einfach nur hingehen oder?
Vielleicht, ich weiß es nicht.
John's head was on fire. He seemed surprised. He shouldn't have been.
Ah, guck mal. Oh. Okay, sind auf jeden Fall sauber.
John suddenly realized the time. Distracted by his new drive to improve his life, he had become late. He needed to hurry, or he'd miss the bus to work.
Warum kann der nicht vorwärts laufen? Rechts, guck. Okay.
John had left his apartment late, but if he caught the express bus, he might make it to work on time. John didn't really like his job, but it had two qualities in its favour. One, he could pay his rent, and two, Barbara. Currently John's top candidate for his reunion
Der
date.
Bus vielleicht auf der anderen Seite.
Das ist total irritierend. Ich werde nicht immer so doppelt einmal im Livestream.
Also, oh. Falscher Weg. Da,
John
okay.
noticed a moderately attractive peen waiting at the stop. He tried to start a conversation and did not get the reaction he'd hoped for. It was probably because he was a minimum wage peen. She could probably sense it.
Irgendwie ist der Stream tot. Ah,
Echt?
jetzt läuft's wieder weiter.
Jetzt, hallo. Geh mit.
The office hummed with cold fluorescent lighting. The air was cold and stale, lifeless. How long had John worked here? Long enough to deserve better.
Ich komm nicht vorbei.
John was late, but he felt daring. He could sneak into the office through the archives, or he could stroll through the front entrance with enough confidence to bluff his boss. Predictably, he chose the direct route.
Für irgendwas habe ich Punkte bekommen. Oh.
John was nearly trampled by the morning coffee rush.
Das hat er selbst mit 3 Stunden gespielt.
Keine Ahnung.
6,99 € hat er ausgegeben dafür. Geh weg. Geh weg.
Everyone else was hard at work, grinding away. John might actually get away with this.
Ich da auch hinsetzen sollte.
The boss. He homed in on John, deluging him with spit and buzzwords. The boss ran out of synonyms for John's failings and gave him an ultimatum.
Ja, das ist ganz schön Verzögerung.
Barbara would definitely not be interested in dating John if he was unemployed. He had to get to the quality assurance department. There might be a faulty dildo just waiting to cost the company millions in lawsuits. John would have to test them all.
Was? 50 Stück? Oh komm. Wenn die Steuerung nicht so beknackt wäre.
Ich glaube, du kannst irgendwie umschalten zwischen vorwärts und rückwärts.
Ach. Ja, mit Leertaste.
Every atom of John's rectum began to vibrate with the frequencies of pure pleasure. His orifice was a paradise. This vibrator would end all wars.
Ja, wirklich mit der Leertaste.
It was good.
Einmal. Das ist 50 Mal. Will ich mich verarschen? Ich will jetzt ja draufdrücken, ne?
Stück testen.
That one
Boah,
was
das
good
ist
too.
super viel.
The Prostate Pounder X900 series, the most advanced vibrator on the market. Sweet mother of no, John, that's too much pleasure for one anus to handle. John's butt hurt, but his heart was proud. If that vibe had gotten out into the world, it could have injured a customer as badly as it had ravaged his anus.
So. Ja. Mit
The boss
was?
arrived and
Kühlschrank.
congratulated John on taking one for the team and jumping on the hand grenade, or in this case, putting it up his butt.
Sehe ich irgendwie den Desktop.
Ja, da oben. Ich muss da irgendwie rankommen.
John
Ne?
was having trouble following the conversation because he was quite high on suppository painkillers. And then the boss said it. Promotion. Finally, the company was recognizing John's
war's schon.
hard work and ignoring his minor faults like lack of talent, constant lateness, and flatulence. John's new office smelt like polished wood and success. John's success. Sam dropped by. He'd heard John had been hurt. John said he was fine. He wasn't a softie to complain about a mildly ruptured rectum. Besides, he had a promotion to celebrate. John had met Sam in college during a sports ball game. He'd given him some stiff competition.
Weh, du schießt. Yeah. Nein.
Ich glaube, diese Papierschnitte tun weh.
Not stiff enough.
Ach, du willst doch gar nicht mehr Fußball spielen?
They'd started at Flesh
Jetzt
Corp
hat es
product
Fußball
testing together. Nothing builds a friendship like a long day of dildo mounting.
Oh.
Yes, John had known Sam for a while. But John couldn't hang out with Sam. He had a reunion to prepare for. He was going out with Barbara tonight. He just had to ask her. Everyone was quiet, listening to the presentation. A good moment for John to ask Barbara out. That's not Barbara, John. Warmer. Barbara agreed. Well, she nodded. Sort of. Things were really going John's way.
Wie kommt man auf so ein Spiel?
John tried to act as suave as possible and listen to Barbara talk business. He didn't want to blow his chances at long-term love and short-term sex.
Ich mach hier ein.
Barbara began to talk about
Aua.
monthly feedback figures, and John started to zone out, imagining him and Barbara at the reunion, a power couple. She would make his classmates sick with envy, if he could get her to tone down the boring chatter. John's balls were gripped by certainty. Barbara was the perfect date for the reunion. John thought he would impress Barbara by going behind the bar and showing the bartender a thing or two.
Das hab ich gut gemacht, ha?
Despite Barbara's
Du
protest
machst ja eigentlich gar
that it
nichts
was
mehr, hey.
unnecessary,
Oh, ja, haut ab.
John
Aber-
knew that a true gentleman should follow her home.
Satt.
He was excited. There was still 3 months until the reunion, and he'd already landed his perfect date. All he had to do was seal the deal. Barbara thanked John for the evening and politely did not invite him inside for coffee or sex, even though John had dropped some pretty obvious hints he'd be into both, or just the sex. The door slammed on John's hopes. He didn't understand. He'd laughed at all Barbara's pie chart jokes. He'd listened to her boring stories. The blank eyes of the lawn flamingos were witnesses to John's shame. John began the lonely walk home, thoughts tumbling like shoes in a dryer. He had done everything wrong.
Barbara ist ein Name, der
Barbara
irgendwie
had
fast
led him
weiblich
on
sein
just to
lässt, oder?
humiliate him.
Ist aber trotzdem ein Penis.
Es ist halt so in dieser Welt, das sind alle. Und du hast den Bumm eingesammelt.
Ja,
John
sollte ich auch
felt
machen.
empty. How could he get love?
Da hast du sogar eine Kippe. Für das. Oh ne, die fliegt weg.
He felt like he
Ja,
was
Vogel.
missing something, some key to attracting sex. But John was shooting blanks. What did Peens want? Then it hit John out of nowhere. Stuff.
Ganz schön aufregend.
He had the success.
Ich krieg
He
keine
just
Zuschauer
needed to
dazu.
show it
Bei
off.
PUBG hatte ich immer Zuschauer nach ein paar
But where
Minuten.
was John going to get all the stuff he wanted? John
Das
needed a
erstaunt mich eigentlich, dass hier
sign.
keiner zuschaut. Ich meine, das geht schon ab.
Das weiß ja vorher keiner, ne?
Ja.
A new day, a new John. He waited outside his
Alle
local
homophob
buttload
hier.
store for it to open, eager to spend his promotion bonus on stuff. The best way to impress women.
Die haben einen Dackel, wie süß.
If it was buttloads of stuff John wanted, then he would need buttloads of cash.
Selbst wenn du nicht weißt, was du machen sollst im Spiel, du machst eh immer das Richtige, du kannst nicht viel machen. Oh nein, ich hänge fest.
Früher oder später, ja.
Ja, erklär mal, wie ich da reinkommen soll. Rückwärts vielleicht.
Suddenly it occurred to John that he was going to make a lot of choices. And every one of those choices would tell the world who he was. Did he want cheese or sausage? Delicious. Also delicious.
Also eine
How
Brezel
could
ist
John
einfach
decide?
günstig, glaube ich.
Just so Moorish. What would a date think when they sat in John's home? Comfort or style? Nothing says style like an overpriced and uncomfortable chair. John weighed up all the differences, but this was a tough choice.
Jedenfalls stillst du deinen Hunger. Ordentlich.
John chose the extremely, obviously bad TV. John realized that it was only 2 months and 29 days until the reunion. Time flies. Cactus or rose? Was John a rugged hero or a romantic poet? If John grew his own flowers, then
Boah,
it'd
das
save
ist ja
on
so mit
romantic
das Mieseste,
gestures
was ich
in
hier
the long
gespielt
run.
habe.
There was nothing John could take with him to the grave. Except his coffin. John liked to get his pizza delivered. That way he could see Delilah, the delivery peen. She always made him smile. John knew that Delilah thought pineapple on pizza was an abomination. What bedding would Delilah prefer? John couldn't help wondering. Pizza sheets would show her that John could also deliver in bed. Devoid of any sense of style, buying new clothes would be John's toughest challenge.
Kunst ist es eigentlich, irgendwann mal die Steuerung zu beherrschen, glaube ich, bei dem Spiel.
He bought an outfit without trying it on. It was a hula skirt. I thought you should know that much. It's not flattering. Music, the food of love. Should John go retro-sophisticated or just retro? John was sure he could just pirate extra records. Every can was made of metal, pulled from the bones of the earth, wrestled to the surface and smelted in roaring furnaces. All so John could buy peas preserved in salty water and stick them up his butt. John's new purchases were on the way to his apartment. All he had to do was invite a date over. One look at all his stuff and they'd be overwhelmed with sexual desire. John felt proud and also hungry. It gave him an idea. He should invite Delilah over for dinner. John was excited. Delilah was on her way. He just needed to set the mood to romance. Classy.
Ja.
Aufregend, ne?
Vielleicht ist ja der Multiplayer-Aspekt deutlich interessanter. Aber dann müsstest du erstmal überlegen, der ist mit dem Multiplayer spielen kann.
Oh, jetzt hab ich das, okay. Nein.
Ziemlich.
John hoped she didn't have allergies. That must be Delilah at the door.
Du schaffst es.
Sie kommt, sie kommt. Ja, ich versuche doch die Türe aufzumachen.
The door opened and there was Delilah. John gulped down his nerves and invited her in. John could tell that Delilah was impressed by his stuff. It was time to crank up the mood to seduction.
Oh Mann, ich mache alles kaputt.
John wanted to offer Delilah wine, but he'd already popped his cork. Delilah started looking as nervous as John felt. He assumed it was because she was shy too. They really were compatible.
Ich bin überhaupt
Of course,
gar nicht
at the
schüchtern.
reunion, he couldn't
Erzähl doch
mention
sowas nicht.
Delilah was a delivery pain. That would be embarrassing.
Sie haut ab.
Delilah suddenly headed for the door. And just like that, John was alone again. Delilah hadn't even looked at his stuff. Not even the pizza bedspread. The rejection burned. John felt insignificant. He had everything he wanted. The job, the money, the stuff.
Alles kaputt
So
machen.
much stuff. He wanted to destroy all of it. Shove it into the abyss. His stuff didn't matter. He was a shaft in the machine. A lonely piston pumping away like all the others in his rigid place. Nothing special about him. Why should Delilah or Barbara or any other peen be interested in dating him? John never liked plants anyway. Begone, boxes! He was just like everyone else and they could tell. Sayonara, stool. John wanted to be special, but he had to face the numb truth. He wasn't. And all the money and stuff he'd ever accumulate wouldn't change that. He thought it would make him unique, but it just made him more like everyone else. He should leave it all. Get out of this little town and go on an adventure. See the world. He was a boring corporate drone, but he didn't have to be. He could be a traveller, exploring jungles and climbing mountains. He could visit the wonders of the world and get his picture taken. Like Peony Island, The unspoiled paradise he'd seen on TV. That was it. John had to travel. Bags packed, John was ready to put 5,000 miles between him and his problems. He was leaving it all behind. John was so close, he could almost smell the freedom of the skies. Security sent John back through the detector.
Wie soll ich meine Taschen leeren?
John had forgotten he had his nail clippers with him.
Okay.
He'd have to buy another pair soon, or he'd look ridiculous. When the acceleration of takeoff had slackened, John felt a sweet relief. He had left his worries on the runway. He was up in the clouds, on his way to adventure. John's adventure had begun at last, and clearly it was a small
bin in
world
Afrika.
after all, and also a flat one. That was going to piss off the globeheads.
Okay.
Da muss ich doch gar nicht auf das Vins draufwerfen oder so.
Ich habe keine Ahnung, was ich jetzt noch machen soll hier.
Ja, ich fürchte, es war sehr reizvoll, aber ich muss jetzt dann leider auch weg.
Kein Problem. Ich höre jetzt dann auch auf.
Ich wünsche dir noch viel Erfolg beim Suchen der 13 Weltwunder.
Okay.
Also dann. Ciao, ciao.
Mach's gut. Ciao, ciao.
Benutzer hat deinen Channel verlassen.